Tomsk by Anton Pavlovich Chekhov. May 16. It seems my strong boots were the cause being too tight at the back, my sweet Misha. If you ever have any children, which I have no doubt you, well, the advice I bequeath to them is not to run after cheap goods. Cheapness in Russian goods is the label of worthlessness to my mind. It is better to go barefoot than to wear cheap boots. Picture my agony. I keep getting out of the chaise, sitting down on damp ground, and taking off my boots to rest my heels so comfortable in the frost. I had to buy felt overboots in Ishim, so I drove in felt boots till they collapsed from the mud and the damp. In the morning between 5 and 6 o'clock, one drinks tea at a hut. Tea on a journey is a great blessing. I know its value now, and drink it with the fury of a Yanov. It warms one through and drives away sleep. One eats a lot of bread with it, and in the absence of other nourishment, bread has to be eaten in great quantities. That is why peasants eat so much bread and farinaceous food. One drinks tea and talks with the peasant women, who are sensible, tender-hearted, industrious, as well as being devoted mothers, and more free than in European Russia. Their husbands don't abuse or beat them, because they are as tall, as strong, and as clever as their lords and masters are. They act as drivers when their husbands are away from home. They like making jokes. They are not severe with their children. They spoil them. The children sleep on soft beds and lie as long as they like, drink tea and eat with the men, and scold the latter when they laugh at them affectionately. There is no diphtheria. Malignant smallpox is prevalent here, but strange to say, it is less contagious than in other parts of the world. 2 or 3 catch it and die, and that is the end of the epidemic. There are no hospitals or doctors. The doctoring is done by felchers. Bleeding and cupping are done on a grandiose, brutal scale. I examined a Jew with cancer in the liver. The Jew was exhausted, hardly breathing, but that did not prevent the felcher from cupping him 12 times. Apropos of the Jews, here they till the land, work as drivers and ferrymen, trade, and are called Christiani translators. Note Roman 1 peasants, literally Christians, because they are de jure and de facto Christiani. They enjoy universal respect, and according to the president, they are not infrequently chosen as village elders. I saw a tall, thin Jew who scowled with disgust and spat when the president told indecent stories. A chaste soul, his wife makes splendid fish soup. The wife of the Jew who had cancer regaled me with pike, caviar, and with most delicious white bread. One hears nothing of exploitation by the Jews. And by the way, about the Poles, there are a few exiles here sent from Poland in 1864. They are good, hospitable, and very refined people. Some of them live in a very wealthy way, others are very poor and serve as clerks at the stations. Upon the amnesty, the former went back to their own country, but soon returned to Siberia again. They are better off. The latter dream of their native land, though they are old and infirm. At Ishim, a wealthy Pole, Pan Zalieski, who has a daughter like Sasha Kislyov, for a ruble gave me an excellent dinner and a room to sleep in. He keeps an inn and has become a moneygrubber too. The marrow of his bones he fleeces everyone, but yet one feels the Polish gentleman in his manner, in the way the meals are served, in everything. He does not go back to Poland through greed, and through greed endures snow till St. Nicolai's Day, when he dies. His daughter, who was born at Ishim, will remain here forever, and so will multiply the black eyes and soft features in Siberia. This casual intermixture of blood is to the good, for the Siberian people are not beautiful. There are no dark-haired people. Perhaps you would like me to write about the Tatars. Certainly, there are very few of them here. They are good people. In the province of Kazan, everyone speaks well of them, even the priests, and in Siberia, they are better than the Russians, as the president said to me, in the presence of Russians, who assented to this by their silence. My God, how rich Russia is in good people, if it were not for the cold which deprives Siberia of the summer, and if it were not for the officials who corrupt the peasants and the exiles, Siberia would be the richest and happiest of lands. I have nothing for dinner. Sensible people usually take 20 pounds of provisions when they go to Tomsk. It seems I was a fool, and so I have fed for a fortnight on nothing but milk and eggs, which are boiled so that the yolk is hard, and the white is soft. One is sick of such fare in 2 days. I have only twice had dinner during the whole journey, not counting the Jewess fish soup, which I swallowed after I had had enough to eat with my tea. I have not had any vodka. The Siberian vodka is disgusting, and indeed I got out of the habit of taking it. While I was on the way to Ekaterinburg, one ought to drink vodka. It stimulates the brain, dull and apathetic from traveling, which makes one stupid and feeble. Stop, I can't write. The editor of the Sibirsky Vyasnik and a local Nozdryov, a drunkard, and a rake, has come to make my acquaintance. N has drunk some beer and gone away. I continue. For the first 3 days of my journey, my collarbones, my shoulders, and my vertebrae ached from the shaking and jolting. I couldn't stand or sit or lie. But on the other hand, all pains in my head and chest have vanished, my appetite has developed incredibly, and my hemorrhoids have subsided completely, the overstrain, the constant worry with luggage, and so on. And perhaps the farewell drinking parties in Moscow had brought on spitting of blood in the mornings, which induced something like depression, arousing gloomy thoughts. But towards the end of the journey it has left off now. I haven't even a cough. It is a long time since I have coughed so little as now, after being for a fortnight in the open air. After the first 3 days of traveling my body grew used to the jolting. And in time, I did not notice the coming of midday and then of evening, and night. The time flew by rapidly, as it does in serious illness. You think it is scarcely midday when the peasants say you ought to put up for the night, sir, or we may lose our way in the dark. You look at your watch, and it is actually 8 o'clock. They drive quickly, but the speed is nothing remarkable. Probably, I have come upon the roads in bad condition, and in winter traveling would have been quicker. They dash uphill at a gallop. And before setting off and before the driver gets on the box, the horses need 2 or 3 men to hold them. The horses remind me of the fire brigade horses in Moscow. One day, we nearly ran over an old woman, and another time almost dashed into an étape. Now, would you like an adventure for which I am indebted to Siberian driving only? I beg mother not to wail and lament, for it all ended well on the 6th of May towards daybreak. I was being driven with 2 horses by a very nice old man. It was a little chaise. I was drowsy, and to while away the time watched the gleaming of zigzagging lights in the fields and birch copses. It was last year's grass on fire. It is their habit here to burn it. Suddenly, I hear the swift rattle of wheels. A postcart at full speed comes flying towards us like a bird. My old man hastens to move to the right. The 3 horses dash by, and I see in the dusk a huge heavy postcart with a driver for the return journey. In it was followed by a second cart, also going at full speed. We made haste to move aside. To the right, to my great amazement and alarm, the approaching cart moved not to its right, but its left. I hardly had time to think, good heavens, we shall run into each other, when there was a desperate crash. The horses were mixed up in a dark blur, the yokes fell off, my chaise reared up into the air, and I flew to the ground, and my luggage on the top of me. But that was not all. A third cart was dashing upon us. This really ought to have smashed me and my luggage to atoms, but thank God I was not asleep. I broke no bones in the fall, and managed to jump up so quickly that I was able to get out of the way. Stop, I bawled to the third cart. Stop. The third dashed up to the second, and stopped. Of course, if I were able to sleep in a chaise, or if the third cart had followed instantly on the second, I should certainly have come back a cripple or a headless horseman. The results of the collision were broken shafts, torn traces, yokes, and luggage scattered on the ground, the horses scared and harassed, and the alarming feeling that we had just been in danger. It turned out that the first driver had lashed up the horses, while in the other 2 carts the drivers were asleep, and the horses followed the first team, with no one controlling them. On recovering from the shock, my old man and the other 3 men fell to abusing each other ferociously. Oh, how they swore! I thought it would end in a fight. You can't imagine the feeling of isolation in the middle of that savage swearing crew in the open country, just before dawn, in sight of the fires far and near, consuming the grass, but not warming the cold night air. Oh, how heavy my heart was! One listened to the swearing, looked at the broken shafts, and at one's tormented luggage, and it seemed as though one were cast away in another world, as though one would be crushed in a moment. After an hour's abuse, my old man began splicing together the shafts with cord, and tying up the traces. My straps were forced into the service too. We got to the station, somehow crawling along and stopping from time to time. After 5 or 6 days' rain with high winds began. It rained day and night. The leather overcoat came to the rescue, and kept me safe from rain and wind. It's a wonderful coat. The mud was almost impassable. The drivers began to be unwilling to go on at night, but what was worst of all, and what I shall never forget, was crossing the rivers. One reaches a river at night, one begins shouting, and so does the driver. Rain, wind, pieces of ice glide down the river. There is a sound of splashing, and to add to our gaiety, there is the cry of a heron. Herons live on the Siberian rivers, so it seems they don't consider the climate, but the geographical position. Well, an hour later, in the darkness, a huge ferryboat of the shape of a barge comes into sight with huge oars that look like the pincers of a crab. The ferrymen are a rowdy set, for the most part exiles banished here by the verdict of society for their vicious life. They use insufferably bad language, shout, and ask for money for vodka. The ferrying across takes a long, long time, an agonizingly long time. The ferryboat crawls again, the feeling of loneliness. And the heron seems calling on purpose, as though he means to say, "Don't be frightened, old man. I am here, the Lintvaryovs have sent me here from the Syal." On the 7th of May, when I asked for horses, the driver said the Irtish had overflowed its banks and flooded the meadows that Kuzma had set off the day before, and had difficulty in getting back, and that I could not go but must wait. I asked wait, till when answer the Lord only knows, that was vague. Besides, I had taken a vow to get rid on the journey of 2 of my vices, which were a source of considerable expense, trouble, and inconvenience. I mean my readiness to give in and be overpersuaded. I am quick to agree, and so I have had to travel anyhow, sometimes to pay double, and to wait for hours at a time. I had taken to refusing to agree, and to believing my sides have ached less. For instance, they bring out not a proper carriage, but a common jolting cart. I refuse to travel in the jolting cart, I insist, and the carriage is sure to appear, though they may have declared that there was no such thing in the whole village. And so on. Well, I suspected that the Irtish floods were invented simply to avoid driving me by night through the mud. I protested, and told them to start. The peasant, who had heard of the floods from Kuzma, and had not himself seen them, scratched himself, and consented. The old men encouraged him, saying that when they were young and used to drive, they were afraid of nothing. We set off, much rain, a vicious wind, cold, and felt boots on my feet. Do you know what felt boots are like? When they are soaked, they are like boots of jelly. We drive on, and behold, there lies stretched before my eyes an immense lake, from which the earth appears in patches here and there, and bushes stand out. These are the flooded meadows. In the distance stretches the steep bank of the Irtish, on which there are white streaks of snow. We begin driving through the lake. We might have turned back, but obstinacy prevented me, and an incomprehensible impulse of defiance mastered me, that impulse which made me bathe from the yacht in the middle of the Black Sea, and has impelled me to not a few acts of folly. I suppose it is a special neurosis. We drive on and make for the little islands and strips of land. The direction is indicated by bridges and planks. They have been washed away. To cross by them, we had to unharness the horses and lead them over one by one. The driver unharnesses the horses. I jump out into the water in my felt boots and hold them a pleasant diversion. And the rain and wind, queen of heaven, at last we get to a little island where there stands a hut without a roof. Wet horses are wandering about in the wet dung. A peasant with a long stick comes out of the hut and undertakes to guide us. He measures the depth of the water with his stick and tries the ground. He led us out, God bless him, for Iton, to a long strip of ground, which he called the ridge. He instructs us that we must keep to the right, or perhaps it was to the left, I don't remember, and get on to another ridge. This we do. My felt boots are soaking and squelching, my socks are snuffling. The driver says nothing and clicks dejectedly to his horses. He would gladly turn back, but by now it was late. It was dark. At last, oh joy, reach the Irtish. The further bank is steep, but the near bank is sloping. The near one is hollowed out, looks slippery, hateful, not a trace of vegetation. The turbid water splashes upon it with crests of white foam and dashes back again, as though disgusted at touching the uncouth, slippery bank, on which it seems that none but toads and the souls of murderers could live. The Irtish makes no loud or roaring sound, but it sounds as though it were hammering on coffins in its depths. A damnable impression. The further bank is steep, dark, brown, desolate. There is a hut. The ferrymen live in it. One of them comes out and announces that it is impossible to work the ferry as a storm has come up. The river, they said, was wide, and the wind was strong, and so I had to stay the night at the hut. I remember the night, the snoring of the ferrymen, and my driver, the roar of the wind, the patter of the rain, the mutterings of the Irtish. Before going to sleep, I wrote a letter to Maria Vladimirovna. I was reminded of the Bazarovsky pool. In the morning, they were unwilling to ferry me across. There was a high wind. We had to row across in the boat. I am rowed across the river. While the rain comes lashing down, the wind blows, my luggage is drenched, and my felt boots, which had been dried overnight in the oven, become jelly again. Oh, the darling leather coat! If I did not catch cold, I owe it entirely to that. When I come back, you must reward it with an anointing of tallow or castor oil on the bank. I sat for a whole hour on my portmanteau waiting for horses to come from the village. I remember it was very slippery clambering up the bank in the village. I warmed myself and had some tea. Some exiles came to beg for alms. Every family makes 40 pounds of wheaten flour into bread for them. Every day, it's a kind of forced tribute. The exiles take the bread and sell it for drink at the tavern. One exile, a tattered, closely shaven old man, whose eyes had been knocked out in the tavern by his fellow exiles, hearing that there was a traveler in the room, and taking me for a merchant, began singing and repeating the prayers he recited. The prayer for health, and for the rest of the soul, and sang the Easter hymn, "Let the Lord arise," and with thy saints, O Lord, goodness knows what he didn't sing then. He began telling lies, saying that he was a Moscow merchant. I noticed how this drunken creature despised the peasants, upon whom he was living. On the 11th, I drove with posting horses. I read the books of complaints at the posting station in my boredom. On the 12th of May, they would not give me horses, saying that I could not drive, because the river Ob had overflowed its banks, and flooded all the meadows. They advised me to turn off the track as far as Krasny Yar, then go by boat 12 versts to Dubrovin. And at Dubrovin, you can get posting horses. I drove with private horses as far as Krasny Yar. I arrive in the morning. I am told there is a boat, but that I must wait a little, as the grandfather had sent the workman to row the president's secretary to Dubrovin in it. Very well, we will wait. An hour passes, a second. A third midday arrives, then evening. Alakarim, what a lot of tea I drank, what a lot of bread I ate, what a lot of thoughts I thought, and what a lot I slept. Night came on, and still no boat. Early morning came at last at 9 o'clock. The workmen returned. Thank heaven, we are afloat at last. And how pleasant it is, the air is still, the oarsmen are good, the islands are beautiful, the floods caught men and cattle unawares, and I see peasant women rowing in boats to the islands to milk the cows, and the cows are lean and dejected. There is absolutely no grass for them owing to the cold. I was rowed 12 versts at the station of Dubrovin. I had tea, and for tea they gave me, can you imagine, waffles? I suppose the woman of the house was an exile, or the wife of an exile. At the next station, an old clerk, a Pole, to whom I gave some antipyrin for his headache, complained of his poverty, and said Count Sapiega, a Pole, who was a gentleman-in-waiting at the Austrian court, and who assisted his fellow countrymen, had lately arrived there on his way to Siberia. He stayed near the stations, said the clerk, and I didn't know it. Holy Mother, he would have helped me. I wrote to him at Vienna, but I got no answer. And so, on why am I not a Sapiega, I would send this poor fellow to his own country. On the 14th of May again, they would not give me horses. The Tom was flooded. How vexatious! It meant not mere vexation, but despair. 50 versts from Tomsk, and how unexpected! A woman in my place would have sobbed. Some kind-hearted people found a solution for me. Drive on, sir, as far as the Tom. It is only 6 versts from here. There they will row you across to Yar, and Ilya Markovitch will take you on from there to Tomsk. I hired a horse and drove to the Tom, to the place where the boat was to be. I drove there. Was no boat. They told me it had just set off with the post and was hardly likely to return, as there was such a wind. I began wading. The ground was covered with snow. It rained and hailed, and the wind blew. 1 hour passed a second, and no boat. Fate was laughing at me. I returned to the station. There the driver of the mail, with 3 posting horses, was just setting off for the Tom. I told him there was no boat. He stayed. Fate rewarded me. The clerk, in response to my hesitating inquiry whether there was anything to eat, told me the woman of the house had some cabbage soup. Oh rapture, oh radiant day! And the daughter of the house did in fact give me some excellent cabbage soup, with some capital meat, with roast potatoes and cucumbers. I have not had such a dinner since I was at Pan Zalieski's. After the potatoes, I let myself go and made myself some coffee. Towards evening the mail driver, an elderly man who had evidently endured a good deal in his day, and who did not venture to sit down in my presence, began preparing to set off to the Tom. I did the same. We drove off. As soon as we reached the river, the boat came into sight. A long boat. I have never dreamed of a boat so long. While the post was being loaded onto the boat, I witnessed a strange phenomenon. There was a peal of thunder, a queer thing, in a cold wind with snow on the ground. They loaded up and rowed off. My sweet Misha, forgive me for being so rejoiced that I did not bring you with me. How sensible it was of me not to take anyone with me. At first our boat floated over a meadow near willow bushes. As is common before a storm or during a storm, a violent wind suddenly sprang up on the water and stirred up the waves. The boatman, who was sitting at the helm, advised our waiting in the willow bushes till the storm was over. They answered him that if the storm grew worse, they might stay in the willow bushes till night and be drowned all the same. They proceeded to settle it by majority of votes, and decided to row on. An evil mocking fate is mine. Oh, why these jests? We rowed on in silence, concentrating our thoughts. I remember the figure of the mail driver, a man of varied experiences. I remember the little soldier, who suddenly became as crimson as cherry juice. I thought, if the boat upsets, I will fling off my fur coat, and my leather coat, then my felt boots, then, and so on. But the bank came nearer, and nearer. One's soul felt easier, An easier one's heart throbbed with joy, one heaved deep sighs, as though one could breathe freely at last, and leapt on the wet slippery bank, thank God. At Ilya Markovich's, the converted Jews, I was told that I could not drive at night, the road was bad, that I must remain, till next day. Very good, I stayed after tea. I sat down to write you this letter, interrupted by the visit of the President. The President is a rich mixture of Nozdryov H. Lestakov, and accrue a drunkard, a rake, a liar, a singer, a storyteller, and with all that a good-natured man he had brought with him, a big trunk stuffed full of business, papers, a bedstead and mattress, a gun, and a secretary. The secretary is an excellent, well-educated man, a protesting liberal who has studied in Petersburg, and is free in ideas. I don't know how he came to Siberia. He is infected to the marrow of his bones with every sort of disease, and is taking to drink thanks to his principal, who calls him Kalia. The representative of authority sends for a cordial doctor. He bawls, drink another glass, I beseech you humbly. Of course, I drink it. The representative of authority drinks, soundly, lies outrageously, uses shameless language. We go to bed in the morning. A cordial is sent for again. They swill the cordial till 10 o'clock, and at last they go. The converted Jew Ilya Markovich, whom the peasants here idolize so, I was told, gave me horses to drive to Tomsk. The President, the secretary, and I got into the same conveyance all the way. The President told lies, drank out of the bottle, boasted that he did not take bribes, raved about the scenery, and shook his fist at the tramps that he met. We drove 15 versts. Then halt the village of Brovkino. We stop near a Jew's shop and go to take rest and refreshment. The Jew runs to fetch us a cordial, while his wife makes us some fish soup, of which I have written to you already. The President gave orders that the Sotsky, the Desyatsky, and the road contractor should come to him, and in his drunkenness began reproving them, not the least restrained by my presence. He swore like a totter. I soon parted from the President, and on the evening of the 15th of May, by an appalling road, reached Tomsk. During the last 2 days, I have only done 70 versts. You can imagine what the roads are like. In Tomsk, the mud was almost impassable of the town, and the manner of living here I will write in a day or two, but goodbye for now, I am tired of writing. There are no poplars, the Kovshnikov general was lying. I have seen no nightingales, there are magpies and cuckoos. I received a telegram of 80 words from Suvorin today. Excuse this letter's being like a hodgepodge, it's incoherent, but I can't help it. Sitting in an hotel room, one can't write better. Excuse it's being long, it's not my fault, my pen ran away with me. Besides, I wanted to go on talking to you. It's 3 o'clock in the night. My hand is tired, the wick of the candle wants snuffing. I can hardly see. Write to me at Sahalin every 4 or 5 days. It seems that the post goes there not only by sea, but across Siberia, so I shall get letters frequently. All the Tomsk people tell me that there has not been a spring so cold and rainy as this one since 1842. Half Tomsk is under water. My luck. I am eating sweets. I shall have to stay at Tomsk till the rains are over. They say the road to Irkutsk is awful.